Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, explains that making money is a skill, but it's not taught in schools. Schools only teach people how to become employees and build a career. If you come from a middle-class family like he does, there's a high chance your parents unknowingly taught you how to stay poor. This doesn't mean they don't love you or want you to succeed. It's simply because they don't know better. They followed outdated ideas about money and passed them down to you. Kiyosaki compares this to genetics. Poverty is passed on from generation to generation. He wishes he'd read Rich Dad, Poor Dad as a teenager and strongly recommends reading it. Here, we'll explore the 7 key lessons he shares in the book. Lesson 1. The rich don't work for money. When Robert was 9, he and his friend Mike weren't invited to a classmate's beach house because they were poor. Angry and frustrated, Robert went home and asked his dad how to become rich. His dad, a teacher, told him to learn how to make more money. Even at that young age, Robert felt that this advice wasn't helpful. His dad, whom Robert calls his poor dad, earned a good salary but always struggled with money. Seeing how determined Robert and Mike were to learn about wealth, Poor Dad suggested they talk to Mike's father, whom Robert refers to as Rich Dad. At that time, Rich Dad wasn't wealthy yet and hadn't even finished 8th grade, but he owned and ran several small businesses. Robert and Mike were surprised, but they decided to meet Rich Dad. On the day of the meeting, Rich Dad asked them if they were serious about learning how to make money. They said yes. He made them an offer. He would teach them, but not through traditional lessons. Instead, they'd have to work for him to learn. He believed sitting and listening wouldn't help them. Real learning would happen through experience. He also told them to decide quickly because opportunities don't wait. Robert and Mike agreed to the offer. Rich Dad said he'd pay them 10 cents an hour for 3 hours every Saturday. Even though Robert had a softball game that day, he chose to work instead because he saw this as a big opportunity. They started working at a small grocery store managed by Mrs. Martin, one of Rich Dad's employees. Their job was to clean dust off canned goods and neatly stack them on shelves. It was dull work, and the store didn't have air conditioning, so they had to keep the doors open, letting in dust from the road. After 3 hours of work, they earned 30 cents, which wasn't much since comic books cost 10 cents each. After 3 weeks of this, Robert had had enough. He felt like a slave, working for such a small amount of money. He also hadn't seen Rich Dad since their first meeting. Frustrated, he told Mike he was quitting. Mike laughed and said his dad had expected this to happen. Mike explained that his dad had told him to bring Robert back when he was ready to quit. Robert reluctantly agreed to meet Rich Dad the next Saturday. His real dad, Poor Dad, advised him to demand a raise of at least 25 cents an hour and quit if Rich Dad refused. When Robert arrived, he had to wait 45 minutes to meet Rich Dad. This made him even angrier. When Rich Dad finally showed up, Robert accused him of breaking his promise to teach them and called him greedy for paying so little. Rich Dad listened calmly and then asked Robert if teaching meant giving lectures. Robert nodded. Rich Dad explained that life itself is the best teacher, but it doesn't always speak directly. Instead, it pushes you through challenges. How you respond to those challenges determines whether you learn or not. Most people let life push them around. They get angry and blame their job, boss, or spouse. Few people see life's pushes as opportunities to grow. Rich Dad told Robert that none of his 150 employees had ever asked him to teach them about money. They only cared about getting their paycheck. When Robert complained about earning so little, Rich Dad said that most people believe earning more money will solve their problems. But it doesn't. He wanted Robert to learn to make money work for him, not the other way around. Then Rich Dad did something surprising. He stopped paying Robert and Mike altogether. He told them if they really wanted to make money, they'd have to figure it out themselves. For 3 weeks, Robert and Mike worked for free, confused and unsure of what they were supposed to learn. Then Rich Dad took them for ice cream and asked if they'd figured it out yet. When they said no, He told them to look around at the people working hard for little money their whole lives, clinging to the illusion of job security. Rich Dad offered them a raise to 25 cents an hour, then $1, then $5. Each time, Robert was tempted but resisted. Rich Dad explained that most people are controlled by two emotions: fear of not having money and greed, the desire for more. These emotions trap people in what he called the rat race. To escape, Robert needed to think differently and not let his emotions control him. After this lesson, Robert and Mike started thinking creatively. They realized the grocery store threw away old comic books, so they collected them and opened a small comic book library. They charged kids 10 cents to read as many comics as they wanted. They even hired Mike's sister to manage it. The library earned them $9.50 a week while they paid Mike's sister $1. They had learned to make money work for them without having to work themselves. This was their first big lesson. Lesson 2. Financial literacy. Rich Dad taught Robert and Mike that if they wanted to be rich, they needed to understand the difference between assets and liabilities. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket, while a liability takes money out. For example, renting out a house makes it an asset because it generates income, but owning a house you live in is a liability because of taxes and maintenance costs. Many people mistakenly think their home is an asset, which is why they struggle financially. Rich Dad explained that to get rich, they needed to focus on buying income-generating assets first, like investments or businesses. Wealth, according to Rich Dad, is measured by how long you can survive without working. If your assets generate enough income to cover your expenses, you are wealthy. Lesson 3. Mind your own business. Rich Dad explained that many people spend their lives working for someone else instead of building their own wealth. Your business should focus on growing your asset column, not just earning a paycheck. This doesn't mean starting a company. It can simply mean investing in real assets. For example, Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, once told a group of students that his real business wasn't selling hamburgers, it was real estate. McDonald's owns some of the most valuable real estate in the world. Similarly, Robert invested his earnings into assets while working at Xerox, eventually building enough wealth to leave his job. Lesson 4. Taxes and corporations. Rich Dad explained that taxes often hit the middle class harder than the rich. While taxes were initially designed to target the wealthy, they eventually expanded to include the middle class. The rich use corporations to avoid high taxes. A corporation is simply a legal structure that offers financial advantages, like lower tax rates. Understanding this structure is crucial to financial success. Lesson 5. The rich invest money. Kiyosaki believes that ideas can create money. For example, during a market downturn, he bought a house for $20,000 using $2,000 borrowed from a friend. He sold the house for $60,000, making $40,000 in profit within hours. This shows how financial intelligence allows you to see opportunities others miss. Markets change, but improving your financial IQ helps you view change as an opportunity rather than a threat. Lesson 6. Work to learn, not for money. A journalist once asked Robert how to become a best-selling author like him. He suggested she learn sales, but she was offended, thinking her writing skills were enough. Robert explained that being a best-selling author requires marketing skills, not just good writing. Rich Dad encouraged Robert to learn a variety of skills rather than specializing in one area. By doing this, Robert gained valuable experience in sales, marketing, and management. Lesson 7. Overcoming obstacles. Even financially smart people face challenges like fear, doubt, laziness, and bad habits. Everyone fears losing money, but successful people learn to manage that fear instead of letting it stop them. Doubt, negative thoughts, or advice from others often hold people back. Winners focus on opportunities instead of problems. Laziness. Replace "I can't afford it" with "How can I afford it?" This mindset encourages creative thinking. Bad habits. Rich Dad always paid himself first, even when money was tight. This forced him to find ways to cover other expenses, which built discipline. By following these lessons, Robert believes anyone can learn to make money work for them and break free from the cycle of working just for a paycheck.